5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
You're listening to Cosmos Sapiens with the Galaxiscal and Space Ace. We're partnering with the Association of Commercial Space Professionals, or ACSP, to promote their upcoming Space Regulatory Bootcamp, March 4th, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Hello, everybody. This is Ubaldo Siminetti, the Space Ace, and I'm here with the Galaxiscal herself, Inara Tabir. And we are, today we're really excited because we're talking to the team behind the Space Regulatory Bootcamp from ACSP. It's coming up in just a couple weeks in Albuquerque at Q Station. And we really wanted to get kind of an inside, behind the scenes look at the organization, how this all comes together, and what you can expect as an attendee from what will be a really powerful 4 days. So first of all, hello to Morgan and Bryce. Thank you both for being here. Morgan, if you don't mind starting with you, kind of tell us a bit about you and your background and how you got to ACSP.
Sure, yeah. I actually came from a non-space background. I had a degree in development and education, and it was kind of a lucky happenstance that I met the team as ACSP was just really getting started. They had just had a very successful run of their first space regulatory boot camp. I had a couple of interviews with them, and I just loved their energy. They started talking about space law, and I said, "What is that?" And to be honest with you, I thought that they were lying. Like I didn't believe them when they first showed me what they were working on. It's like, how have I not heard about the space industry, the commercial space industry, space law, regulatory issues, all of this? So I was fascinated, and now they'll have to take me out of here kicking and screaming.
I think it's a really normal reaction whenever we talk about, space in general. When you hit the public with space, they're like, wait, that's real? That's happening? And then when you hit even the industry with certain facets of it, like space law, I can't tell you how many people in professional settings in space were like, space law? Is that something we can really do yet? And I'm like, no, it's happening. It's a real thing. So I don't think it's an unusual reaction for sure. You're in good company.
I think there is something that feels unattainable when you hear the word space involved in commercial business. Sure, so it does, yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that.
Sure. Well, it's a twofold part too, I think. And for one, it jars people. They're like, oh my gosh, what do you mean space law? We're not there yet, because I think we think about law as being nestled in a fully established civilization somewhere. And you really can't have it unless you have like shopping malls and fast food delivery in space. But really, it's also an indicator that it's real, that space is real. When we start talking about these branches like space law, then people realize, oh, okay, it must be serious if we're trying to build these systems out. And I think it's important that people realize that we need to start establishing these norms and these linkages across the industry if we're going to be serious about migrating into space.
Well, and I think it goes a long way in helping us turn the conversation away from Earth versus space to an Earth and space, right? Like we're just moving on to the next town, as I like to say, right? The moon, Mars, but it's still Earth. It's still humanity. It's still the things that have gotten us this far will continue to get us even further, right? And so that's what's really exciting about what you all are doing. Bryce, I want to introduce Bryce Kennedy as well. Bryce, tell us about you and how you got into all of this.
Thank you. So, attorney by trade, and how did I get into it? I was in New York City, and I had an executive coaching company. I left law and vowed never to go back. And COVID hit and shut down my company, essentially. And my wife and I were like, okay, it's time to leave New York. And we were just looking around and traveled all around the country, fell in love with New Mexico. And kind of one of these things where I looked up at the stars one day, and there were a couple other events that happened that I said, who is protecting space? Because I love space. It's one of those things that just captures the essence of humanity. And I kind of pulled at that thread a little bit harder, a little bit longer. And, I didn't have anything going. And I really wanted a combination of both the kind of more the altruistic side of commerce as well as the legal side. And so space law really came to fruition, and I found the Aegis team, Aegis Space Law. They took me on as someone who hadn't been a lawyer for about 15 years. And we started doing a lot of work on telecoms and whatnot. And, you know, we kept coming back to this thing. It's like we were seeing a lot of startups fail. And if the US is really positioned itself as a commercial hub where the government is going to start relying on commercial industry to really move the needle forward, then these commercial entities shouldn't be failing at the rate they are. I think it's like 95% or something, way above traditional startups, which already have in a reasonable amount of failure. So when we found this, we decided to create the Space Regulatory Bootcamp, where companies didn't necessarily need to hire an expensive attorney anymore, where they could find very nebulous information that isn't necessarily out in the open for companies and people to discover. So, for example, navigating a Part 450 license from the FAA is brutal, even though that's a new updated NOAA. The licensing regime there, even though that was updated, and that is a lot easier now. But FCC, for example, is a whole just feat under itself to get just to understand the licensing. And so we're like, well, we got to do this. And actually, Air Force Research Labs came to us and they said, hey, a lot of our SBIR and SITR awardees are failing in the Valley of Death. Can you help us? And so that's where it came from. And we saw a huge need that it shouldn't be held under the law firm. We split into a 501c3 nonprofit. I left the law firm and now head up ACSP.
Very cool. I mean, it's well, first of all, what I love is that a lot of us have come to the space industry not having that background in engineering, right? Or having clearance or military background, and I think that is such an amazing trend. And why I think this kind of boot camp is so important, because we need more and more people from outside the industry with various diverse backgrounds in every department across an organization.
100%.
Right? Because
100%.
Like, what's the breakdown generally? I mean, what was the breakdown of attendees at the first boot camp?
It's really interesting. We Morgan slaved away at these numbers just over the between our members, between our LinkedIn followers, between our boot camp attendees, between general socialization of the webinars, all this stuff. And what we found was a high level of, as you would expect, attorneys, but high level of biz dev folk were really prominent in our ecosystem, as well as government and government affairs too. So and then there's a whole other portion of students where and Morgan can talk to this a little bit better than I can, but one of the things when I wanted to get into space was, whatever degree you have, there's normally these add-on degrees. So for me, there was this thing called an LLM for lawyers, and there's some benefit to them, there's some benefit not to them. But what was missing was, when I was with Aegis, they were like, hey, we need you to figure out how to do telecom licensing. I was like, sure, I could do it. I'm an attorney, I'll figure that out. And then I realized it's like a decade of learning and understanding to even be just even slightly good at it. And and those degrees don't teach that. And so that's why we focused on the boot camp, because we're like, okay, we're going to give people, whether they are legal, whether they are biz dev, whether they are students, whether they are artists, at least a high level of the touch points that no matter, this is the funny thing too, is that if you're an artist and you want to put art into space, you still kind of need to understand how licensing works, how to launch, how export compliance. Like, we're still in these areas where we don't have enough removal from the regulatory. It's still not big enough that everyone should just have a small to medium to broad touch point on this regulatory regime to ensure whatever they're working on succeeds and makes it to space.
Well, and ideally, from my perspective, what would be, I'm always looking at structures, and the support that you're offering, I could ideally see every space company out there onboarding somebody to come to your boot camps and develop all these amazing skills. And then instead of having a tool, you get a toolbox out of that one person. I think that's where the real power here is, because you honestly, what you're trying to provide is a basic starting point in working knowledge that can be developed more fully, that gives people access to this entire range of regulatory kind of mythology, if you will, because it really is. It's like digging into an entire industry over decades at one point. So you're offering the ability for them to quickly break into that and to have somebody that's well skilled like a toolbox. And I think that's where you could elevate the space industry very quickly with these boot camps.
Yeah, amen.
That's a
We have
great way
enough
to put it.
tools. We have enough tools in the space industry. We need toolboxes. I like that.
Yeah.
Plenty
And
of
also,
tools.
a way to walk through how to use those tools to the best advantage for your business. That's a part of it as well.
Well, and even bigger, I had the opportunity to speak at SpaceX, and we met one of the amazing engineers on the floor, and she'd been almost kind of solely responsible for creating a faster output for Starship. And what she did was she kept breaking tools, and they had to keep ordering these tools. And so the first strategy was, let's have a lot of these on hand. And then that wasn't working because, you break things constantly when you're moving quickly. So then it was, hey, let's get this industrial 3D printer in-house. And then it was, let me build a better version of this. And then she realized once they had that, she could build new tools no one had ever thought of. And by doing that, she was able to real time create new tools out of her own mind for these jobs. And they were able to create Starship even faster. And I think that's what this is. It's not just that you're going to offer these tools that are kind of already out there. You're offering the ability to build new pathways, because really this space isn't defined yet. A lot of it's there, but a lot of it's yet to be created. And I think the advantage is, if you're able to help these companies understand the system enough, they're able to put demand signals on the government that are going to change things for the better.
Yeah, that's huge.
Amen. Yeah.
Given all that, like, what can attendees expect? Give us maybe a walkthrough of the week while they're there. What can they expect to encounter? Who can they expect to meet? That sort of thing.
Morgan, you want to take this one?
Sure. So we have broken down the curriculum for Bootcamp into specific days focused on specific areas of interest. The first day is going to be a foundational course for anybody who is entering the space industry for the first time or needs that foundational understanding of the laws that govern that space. So if you're starting at ground one, or just want or square one and just want a quick overview, that's where you would want to start. Michelle Hanlon is running that course. She's incredible. She's executive director of the space programs at Ole Miss. Just a phenomenal woman.
Let me jump into,
Yeah.
sorry, with what she's doing there. She's also doing something that I've never heard of, where she's going to be teaching the Outer Space Treaty for companies to argue when they're licensing or their products don't get through the regulatory regime to the agencies. And so this is a whole new area that I'm really excited to see, because, a lot of people poo-poo the Outer Space Treaty. They say it's not useful, it's outdated, blah, 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 blah. But I mean, it is the genesis of every space regulatory body in the world by credo. In the verbiage of the thing, you have to have these. And she's now bringing it to the commercial side, which I'll be very interested to see how she does, where companies can say, they can point to Article 6, Article 2, Article whatever, and say, hey, look, this is actually, it may supersede the agency's authority. It'd be really interesting. I'm not sure totally what to expect, but she is, and I'm sure you guys have talked to her, just a beast of knowledge that I'm terrified to ever go up against her in a court of law.
Those are the best ones. Those are the best ones to have.
Yeah.
I think the great thing about this is that you're allowing people not just to be consumers of the system, but innovators and co-creators, and that's powerful. That's where the real change is going to happen.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is this is an opportunity for people who really, particularly law students, for example, who want to get into the space industry, to write the future of regulation and law, right, for what we're all trying to accomplish. So yeah, that's phenomenal. Okay, so that's day one.
Mhm.
What else? That's just day one.
We've got a day on export controls as well, a day on telecommunications, and a day on government contracting, because we found that those three things are like fundamental for anybody doing business in commercial space. So for those events, Export Controls Day, we've got Don Pierce, who Ubaldo, you and I have talked a little bit about him already.
Love Don.
He's just done everything. A really fascinating person and an incredible teacher. So that would be great. Jack Shelton from Aegis Space Law is also doing some work for us on export controls that day. We've got Will Lewis, Dr. Waleed Mathlouthi, Lynn Montgomery doing a telecommunications.
Oh yeah, we have
Telecommunications.
someone coming from the International Telecommunications Union, Waleed,
Yes.
from Geneva, to talk about this, because the ITU is such a very difficult thing to navigate for at least US entities. I don't know how it is for European entities or other country entities, but it's one of those things where a company needs to obviously get the FCC license, but they also need to get approval from the ITU, which costs a fee, which if it's rejected, the ITU can still keep that fee. And so it's like, do you imagine building that into a startup business model when you don't even know what the fee is yet, and whether you'll lose that, and then whether you'll have to reapply? So that's why we're so excited to have Waleed come, which is so generous to talk to at our boot camp.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Awesome. Well, it's so. What about networking opportunities? Because I know a lot of people, it's a great chance. I mean, that's what I've always found to be the most impactful for me at many of these space conferences. Is you start to see a lot of the same people, so you start to build this, your own community of spacers, as we like to call them. And so, what can people expect from being able just to like sit down and get to know other people there who are there for the same reason?
One of the things that we saw last year was, and I always joke about it, but it was the French toast. So we spent an inordinate amount of money on food last year, because the one thing that we thought, this was my hypothesis, and I was like, well, maybe I won't be president of ACSP anymore if this fails. But my hypothesis was, if we get the food right, because I hate food at conferences, and food to me, since the dawn of human civilization, has been a bonding experience. And so I don't want to bring it into our workspace. I don't want to have people like go out for really crappy fast food. I want this. And so we found this great place called Gather right down the road, and they catered the whole thing in their thing. And so what was funny is we initially thought it'd be this kind of grab and go thing where people would rush over to the thing. I couldn't get people to leave. I couldn't get people to get over back to our training, because they had this opportunity, whether it was early startup organization, whether it was students, whether it was seasoned attorneys, that they either were the subject matter experts, they were the subject matter experts learning from other subject matter experts, or they were a mentor-mentee type of thing. And it was, I'm not even joking, I get chills, and I know this sounds kind of goofy, but I get chills I remember just standing in the doorway watching this, where I would see a senior person from Department of Commerce talk to a student who is terrified to enter the space industry, has no knowledge of that, or like I said, a seasoned attorney who's been doing tax law, now talking to someone who's doing export compliance in space. And I just watched it, and the fact that they were focused on those conversations where we weren't shoving it down their throats, where it wasn't like this, where they were trying to have sell things to each other. It was just a community, a connection building thing over food. So that to me is something I always tell people. I'm like, come for this, because you're not going to have, these boot camps purposely aren't huge. We try to keep them under 100, where you can have these touch points with these subject matter experts, and everyone is always learning. And to me, it was the most glorious thing that came out of these boot camps.
That's phenomenal. I love it.
You don't hear that often. Usually the food is the biggest mess.
Absolutely.
So well done there.
I was willing to screw away our entire operating budget for it, and it worked out well.
Gotta take those risks sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
But
well,
fantastic. So I think, go ahead, Ubaldo.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think so we have an idea of kind of what's going to be available there. I think we can probably wrap up in the next couple of minutes. Is there anything you want to leave the industry with, or potential stakeholders with, that would help them understand the kind of the long-term vision of what you're trying to do?
So our motto is democratizing access to space. And the more that we can, yes, we focus on regulatory, that's one part, but the mission is democratizing access to space. And the more that we can get this siloed information out to as many people as possible, just like what the internet did to people, just what like cell phones did, the more we can get this information out, people will have options and choices to be able to move the ball forward, whether it's in whatever their industry is, but that commerce makes the world go round, and it's going to make what the universe goes around. And so if they have access to that, that's our big thing. And while our MVP right now are the boot camps, we're starting to broaden as subject matter experts and advocacy and student initiatives. And so we have a lot of different moving parts. We're going to be having legal conferences, very specific to that. We're going to be attaching onto other conferences. We're going to have VC thing that hopefully is led by Space Fund, a boot camp with that, as well as talking to people on the Hill. So we're really broadening everything beyond just regulatory, but at the base level, we think this is the best bang for your buck, because again, you don't have those $1,500 attorneys. You learn in a condensed amount of time, and you can take this information immediately and apply it in your organization, or at least have a blueprint of where you want to go, because you can see where that market is.
Fantastic. So I think that's all for me. Ubaldo, do you have any last comments?
No, this is exciting. We're so happy to be spreading the word about what you all are doing, because again, it really is, I think, foundational to the space industry in general, and the success that we can all hopefully see right over the next few years. I mean, now's the right time to be a part of this amazing industry. So thank you both. We'll have links to where everybody can go to register and get more information, so look for that. But again, thank you, and thank you all for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you in March in Albuquerque. Take care.
Thank you guys.
Thanks so much.